Paul Wright is a former Superior Court judge in eastern North Carolina. He's running to be the next Republican governor in North Carolina. Thank you, sir, for being on the show.
Thank you, Kelly.
Mr. Wright, I see your campaign slogan is empower the middle class. Pretty broad statement there. How do you do it?
Well, generally, you look to the federal government dealing with those kind of issues, but I believe that Congress and the federal government, we can not look to them as we have. And I'm looking for the state and local level to empower the middle class. Can I go on? Such as empower them socially, empower them constitutionally, but perhaps today we'll talk about empowering them economically. I believe they've been impoverished in those areas, socially, politically, economically, but economically in particular. If you go out today and go on the highways of North Carolina, you'll see a 10-year-old vehicle, whereas before you would have seen a 5-year-old vehicle in the 1970s. If you look at the wages coming into a family, and there's a lady, she actually is with the Obama administration, has written a book on this. She's running for Senate in Massachusetts, I believe. And they talk about how the standing of the middle-class family since the 70s has declined precipitously, particularly during the last 3 years. So in those areas, I think we need to empower the middle class by looking at what we can do here in North Carolina. I think we have to quit looking to the federal government because, as a conservative, I believe they failed us.
Let's start at the state government level, since you would be governor in theory. What can a governor do that empowers the middle class? What kind of policies do you have in mind for making life better?
I took a few notes here this morning as I was waiting, and first of all, the main concern of the tax-paying, burden-bearing middle class, as I see it, is Obamacare. And if I were governor, I would encourage our legislature and our people to do what Ohio has done last year. That is to pass a constitutional amendment allowing not only the middle class, but anyone to have a doctor of their choice and their own health care decisions. Ohio passed that by a 2/3 majority. But the way economically I would do it is that let everyone have their own home in area tax-free. This is something that we've never done in North Carolina. That is, abolish the income tax, not the income tax, excuse me, the real property tax on homes. There's actually a state that's about to possibly do this in June. That's North Dakota. And they'll be voting whether or not to, and I'll be glad to elaborate on that some, they'll be voting whether or not to do away with the real property tax in North Dakota on homes. And I'd like to see North Carolina follow that way.
You have a couple of issues you've listed on your website, and you can Google the website. Now, up top was the Affordable Care Act, or as you call it, Obamacare, resisting that's influence throughout North Carolina. Is that the top issue for you, or are the issues equal in terms of eliminating the property tax in favor of a different funding mechanism in the county?
I would say they're pretty well equal. I just don't think that North Carolina's resisted Obamacare enough. Our state has not joined in with the others in the suit in the federal court in Atlanta, and nor has it done these constitutional amendments like Missouri and Ohio. But I would say that allowing each county the choice, the option of having either continuation with real property tax on their homes or go to a sales or income tax in that particular county would be one of the star points of my program.
Let's dial into the property tax issue. What is wrong with property taxes? They've been around a long time.
Well, yes, they're easy to collect because there is your home. You know, there's the 80-year-old lady's home, and she has to pay it, or they will eventually, the sheriff will come and foreclose her. So from a tax collection point of view, it's the ideal tax. And of course, you would have to have a period of time to adjust, and the legislature would have to tweak all these issues. I realize that. But I believe that that's one of the ways that this state could go forward in helping in this economic downturn that's so difficult for our middle class.
So the state wouldn't abolish property tax at local level. You would let each individual county make the determination if the property tax was right for its people.
Do you remember when we had the liquor by the drink referendums, and we'd go town by town all through North Carolina, and they would vote whether they wanted alcoholic beverages at the restaurants? Well, it'd be something similar to that. It would be an option, county by county, like you said, in which each county, the voters of that county, would have the right to continue with the property tax or replace it with a sales tax or some other combination.
A direct vote of the people, not of the county commissioners or any other
Well,
political
I'm going
body.
to defer to our legislature to tweak all the issues, but I would prefer a direct vote of the people in that county.
If a county under your plan, say you get it through the legislature, gets that power, do you give them the option in the policy to eliminate the property tax with no other offsetting revenue?
In North Dakota, the group pushing it there had a Boston Think Group, a think tank, who says that each family will get nearly $3,000 by elimination of the property tax. And they believe it's going to lift the boats and that they will not have to raise sales or income tax. I'm more cautious. I would allow, as you said, each county to replace it with a sales tax or an income tax to some degree based on our current income tax, or a combination thereof. And that's probably where the county commissioners would come in.
Well, it doesn't take a genius to think if you cut property taxes, you put more cash into families' pockets. But you've got public schools out there and some things the counties take care of historically that people expect to look good and have grass mowed on the high school football field and that sort of thing. What is the consideration given on a policy like this towards taking care of the schools? I don't know of any conservatives or liberals out there who are against the school system or teachers or students.
Right. Certainly bonds, payment of bonds, all the schools, you will have to have a replacement tax, and that's where there may be 99 counties that don't desire this. There might be one county, New Hanover or Wake, who does desire that. If they do, then they would have to have a replacement tax at that particular county option, either by vote of the people or by the county commission as to whether it's a sales, income, or some combination.
Just looking at what you know about politics, you might be dealing with a Republican House and a Republican Senate based on redistricting. How much would you think they would listen to you on fundamental tax reform like this?
Well, since Governor Hunt and our state getting the veto power in 8-year terms, I think they're very attentive to agendas of governors 1, 2, 3. You know, at some level they're not going to be attentive, but I think they would concerning these middle class issues.
When you look at direct democracy, which is an interesting approach, how much is okay for the state and is healthy to let people decide directly on policies as opposed to electing a representative to go to Raleigh or electing a governor to enact policies on their behalf?
Well, the western states have initiative and referendum, if that's what you're referring to. Our eastern, more colonial, older tradition is to allow the representatives to, what we might say, call all the shots. But I think that at this point, whether we go to initiative or referendum, which is not one of my campaign issues, or whether the representatives, which I defer to them to do it, we need tax relief, which one other thing before we leave, Kelly, is I would like for us to look at what Governor Jindal has done in the state of Louisiana, which he signed last year, a bill giving tax relief to all families with children with educational expenses in public, private, or home schools up to $5,000. That is working well in the state of Louisiana, and I think that's another way we can empower the middle class.
That was my next question. You're calling for a $5,000 tax deduction, and you cite the Louisiana model for that. I got a question. Why do you think $5,000 is the right amount, and how do you define a school-aged child?
Well, first question is the $5,000. Louisiana didn't start out with $5,000. It started out with a much lower figure, and I would be very well pleased if we had a much lower figure, if North Carolina would pass that. As to a school-age child, that's already by statute, I'm pretty sure.
Well, you're the governor. You could define it any way you want. There are people with kids in college. That's school-aged, or is it 18? Or?
Oh, no, I meant secondary school.
So in K through 12, you would help families pay for their school expense, their qualifying school expense.
Right. So let's say a lady just barely making ends meet, and her child needs a computer. It's going to cost $1,000. She will get a tax deduction.
The 10th Amendment, states' rights, is very important to you. What kinds of activities solely belong under state authority, and in this case, North Carolina's authority?
Well, the clearest is Obamacare. George Washington and those gentlemen did not require someone to purchase from a government-approved insurance carrier insurance. And that's the issue with the major issue in America is Obamacare.
What is it about the 10th Amendment that doesn't make it as sexy or as fun to talk about as you hear about the First Amendment Fourth Amendment?
Well, to use legalities, under the Due Process Clause, the federal courts in the last 30, 40 years have incorporated the Bill of Rights under the incorporation doctrine. I don't want to bore your listeners with that. What I'm saying, the 10th Amendment says that all powers not specifically given to the federal government is retained by the people or the states thereof. So it's the repository of rights in which we can guarantee that we will not have totalitarian government, whether fascist or communist or socialist.
You've weighed in also on forced annexations throughout North Carolina, an issue I've covered for several years at the legislature. The big argument with that one is the people say you're coming in and encroaching and I don't want you there. The cities will say, well, you come and you move in right outside our city limits and you enjoy our parks and our city streets and you don't pay for them. What's the balance on that?
I think that there should be a minimal vote, at least 50% plus one, before a county resident who may have lived there 50 years is required to pay the city taxes. So I am against annexation. I know the League of Municipalities and others are the opposite, but I feel that we should not have forced annexation.
You also know that there is strife between the different regions of North Carolina over issues. I want to ask you about that. Where is the strife going on and what are they arguing about?
It depends on the governor, it depends on the region. It depends on the time. Sometimes it's these beautiful bridges, I suppose, going to the different islands. Others, it could be a city in the Piedmont. What I would like to do, should the people honor me with being governor, is to decrease regional competition by saying that the farmer in the mountains that pays taxes, his area gets as much as possible the same benefits as any other person in the state.
So you would set aside population density and other issues and look at more of an equitable situation?
Well, certainly population density would have to be in there because the more people, the more right they have to the public till, yes.
You know, there was a bill that was filed in the legislature last session, I believe. It would have required drug testing for people on, they call it welfare recipients. There's a lot of different state entitlements and benefits enjoyed by people that may or may not be called welfare to them. Which benefits would trigger a mandatory drug test under your proposal as you call for, which would not?
Well, that is a program instituted in Florida, but it is now, the ACLU has sued and it is stopped, and so we really don't know if the federal courts, it's got to wind its way up. So it's really, I think we have to look to other states as a laboratory before we jump in, and I agree with you. It should be very carefully screened so that people continue to have their dignity. In other words, it shouldn't be done too frequently.
Why do you think it is off limits and legally questionable? You are a judge that the state require a drug test before they hand a benefit to someone who says they need it.
I think that we should be very careful before we drug test people with high frequency. I think that, say, once a year, to make sure that people are not violating our drug laws is fine.
We could see a big debate coming up on voter ID, photo ID before you vote, and you're clear on it. You like strict, quote strict, photo ID. Now, conservatives, I've heard across the board, generally like voter ID, but the other side will say, you know, it does create an obstacle there possibly. Is there a balance there, or do you discount the idea that a photo ID could ever cause problems for somebody who might legally want to vote?
Well, I think you have to make accessibility to these photo IDs. Again, when you begin to work out the details, even if you're preparing a meal at home, you have to realize there'll be adjustments to be made, particularly to maintain the dignity of the people you're dealing with.
Now, are social issues big in campaign 2012? We're starting to dive into those. Well, you've written about them and you got a position on them. Or should we look solely at the money right now?
Kelly, last night I was at the Wake County Republican Convention, and they went with Santorum just a little bit more than Romney. And these men have been portrayed as social conservative and then as economic conservative. I think that we have to have both, and as I was going over with you, I want to empower the middle class economically. However, particularly a lot of the people, their religious beliefs, they're very concerned about the social issues.
So you think right now in the primary campaign you better heed to social issues? Yes,
this marriage amendment I'm finding is pretty major out there.
Is North Carolina right now, is the economy in such a shape that the voters and the people want to hear a big social issues debate?
Well, like you say, I think there's going to be the social issue over the marriage amendment till May 8th, but then I think it'll shift to some degree back to the economic.
Now, as governor, you would say that you would be a supporter of a concept called the personhood amendment. It defines a human being as the time, I presume, the egg is fertilized.
Yes.
Would that outlaw abortion in North Carolina if you got a constitutional amendment in the state constitution?
Well, there's been no state passed this yet, but it's being, there's states looking at this. And of course, this would deal with the whole issue of federalism. I'm just for the states doing what they can legally, constitutionally, as far as they can on issues like personhood.
If you recognize the person from the time of fertilization, and since you are willing to talk social issues, what does it do for birth control products?
Well, I'm just not prepared to go into that in the interview. I would have to think about that some.
Why do you think you would be a good governor? And after years of McCrory's campaigning to win the GOP nomination again in 2012, what makes you think you're a superior candidate to the guy who's focused on it all these years?
Well, I'm not running against any particular person. I'm focusing on my campaign, and what I want to say to the people is that I'm the only Republican who's held a constitutional statewide office, that of Superior Court judge. I've held court and worked in almost all the counties of the state. And secondly, I feel like I have electability and based on these issues of mine.
Well, Paul Wright is running in the GOP primary in 2012 for North Carolina governor. Mr. Wright, thank you so much for being on North Carolina Now.
Appreciate it a lot. Thank you.